I never imagined that the quiet years of my marriage would end the way they did. We had built a life that looked stable from the outside, modest but respectable, held together by routines and shared responsibilities. I believed that loyalty mattered more than money, that love could survive uncertainty. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought it would finally bring us closer, give purpose to all the sacrifices I had made without complaint. Instead, it exposed how fragile everything truly was. The distance began subtly. He grew colder, more impatient, treating my exhaustion as an inconvenience rather than a consequence of carrying his child. Bills became a constant argument, even though I stretched every dollar and never asked for more. I noticed how his eyes lingered on other people's success, how resentment crept into his voice whenever he talked about the future. To him, I had become a burden, a reminder of a life that wasn't moving fast enough. The day he left, there was no dramatic fight, just a suitcase by the door and a calm explanation that felt rehearsed. He said he needed freedom, that he wasn't ready to be tied down by a child or a struggling marriage. He didn't touch my stomach or look back as he walked away. I stood there alone, pregnant, abandoned, realizing that the man I trusted had already emotionally left long before that moment. What he never knew was the truth I had carried quietly my entire life. My family's wealth was never discussed openly, never flaunted, never meant to define me. I had been raised to live simply, to earn respect without revealing the safety net beneath me. The company, the shares, the inheritance waiting in the background were things I kept distant, almost unreal. I wanted a marriage built on sincerity, not money. As I watched his car disappear, fear mixed with something unexpected. Beneath the hurt and humiliation, a steady resolve began to form. I realized that this abandonment was not the end of my story. It was the moment everything hidden would eventually come to light, whether he was ready for it or not. The weeks after he left blurred together in a quiet haze. I moved through each day slowly, conserving energy for the life growing inside me, while the silence of the house pressed in from every corner. Friends checked in less than they promised. His family disappeared completely. I learned quickly how invisible a woman becomes once she is no longer convenient. I didn't beg, didn't chase, didn't ask for explanations that would only reopen wounds. I observed, listened, and remembered everything. From a distance, I watched his life continue as if nothing had been broken. Social media told the story he wanted the world to see. New clothes, expensive dinners, unfamiliar places. The man who claimed he couldn't afford a child suddenly had money for indulgence. It didn't take long to notice the pattern. He had aligned himself with someone new, someone impressed by appearances and ambition, someone who believed his carefully crafted version of events. I remained a footnote he hoped would fade away quietly. Behind closed doors, my reality shifted in ways no one could see. Medical appointments forced me to confront my future alone, but they also strengthened me. Each ultrasound reminded me that I was no longer living just for myself. At the same time, long-ignored emails began to feel heavier in my inbox. Messages from family advisors, legal teams, and board members surfaced with increasing urgency. The truth I had kept buried out of humility could no longer remain untouched. The company my grandfather built had reached a critical stage. Leadership decisions needed approval. Shares were being consolidated. My name appeared repeatedly in documents marked confidential. I read them carefully, not with excitement, but with clarity. This inheritance wasn't a fantasy or a distant promise. It was real, active, and immense. $33 million in valuation tied to a legacy I had deliberately kept separate from my marriage. As my pregnancy progressed, so did my understanding of what had really happened. He hadn't just left out of fear. He left because he believed I had nothing to offer beyond emotional labor and sacrifice. He underestimated my silence, mistaking it for weakness. The betrayal wasn't only personal, it was rooted in his certainty that I would remain small while he chased something bigger. The turning point came quietly, without drama. One evening, exhausted and swollen with pregnancy, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked tired, yes, but there was steadiness in her eyes. I realized that waiting for fairness or remorse was pointless. Survival wasn't enough anymore. I needed control, not for revenge, but for protection. I began taking calls I had once avoided. I reviewed contracts, met advisors, and reintroduced myself to a world I had kept at arm's length. Each conversation restored a piece of confidence he had tried to strip away. I didn't announce anything. I didn't correct the lies circulating about me. I let him believe his version of reality was intact. By the time news reached me that he had remarried, I felt nothing but calm. The timing was almost poetic. He had moved on publicly, sealing his choices permanently. What he didn't know was that every step he took away from me pushed him closer to a truth that would soon surface on its own. I wasn't preparing to confront him. I was preparing to step fully into the life he never thought I had. The day my child was born, the world finally felt quiet. Not empty, not lonely, just still. Holding my baby in my arms, I understood that everything I had endured had led to this moment of clarity. I wasn't defined by abandonment or betrayal. I was defined by what I protected and what I chose to build next. While he celebrated his new life elsewhere, I was anchoring myself in something far more permanent. The transition into leadership didn't happen overnight, but it was undeniable. My name appeared publicly for the first time, attached to the company he had unknowingly dismissed as insignificant. Press releases followed. Financial headlines carried numbers he would recognize instantly. $33 million was no longer an abstract figure. It was a reality tied directly to me, revealed without announcement or explanation. The reaction was inevitable. Whispers reached me through mutual acquaintances, disbelief wrapped in regret. His carefully constructed narrative began to fracture under the weight of facts he could no longer ignore. The woman he left while she was pregnant hadn't needed rescuing. She had been choosing restraint. His new marriage suddenly looked rushed, his confidence exposed as fragile. I didn't reach out, and I didn't need to. What mattered most was the shift within my own family circle. The same people who had doubted my quiet choices now saw the intention behind them. I set boundaries where I once accepted neglect. I secured my child's future legally and financially, ensuring stability that no one could threaten or take away. Power, I learned, wasn't loud. It was precise. When our paths crossed again by chance, there were no words exchanged. There didn't need to be. His expression carried the full realization of what he had walked away from, not just financially, but emotionally. I felt no satisfaction in his discomfort, only confirmation. Closure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it arrives through contrast. I walked away that day lighter than I had in years. My life no longer revolved around proving my worth or explaining my silence. I had rebuilt myself in private and emerged whole. He remarried believing he escaped a burden. I stayed, endured, and stepped into a legacy. And in the end, the truth spoke louder than anything I ever could.